Over the course of 3 days, Blake went from being captain of his school's rowing team and a Division I rowing recruit to suffering major organ loss and the amputation of both his legs. Blake was released from the hospital after over 20 major surgeries and 3 months of inpatient care. Life-threatening medical complications notwithstanding, Blake enrolled at the Ohio State University the following fall and earned his BS in finance in 2013. He then enrolled at the Ohio State University's Moritz College of Law and returned to the sport of rowing, making the U.S. national team in the arms and shoulders single event. Blake has made 4 consecutive U.S. rowing teams, including the 2016 Paralympic competition in Rio de Janeiro, where he placed 4th. Following the games in Rio, Blake's fellow teammates and coaches voted him as the Male Athlete of the Year, making him the first ever para-athlete to win that honor. Blake then earned his law degree from Ohio State in 2016 and currently works as an investment research associate for Diamond Hill Capital Management in Columbus, Ohio. He continues to row and is training for the 2020 Paralympic Games in Japan. Ladies and gentlemen, Blake Haxton.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for, first of all, thank you for having me. This is such a treat. And thank you all for coming, especially at this time in the morning. I don't have anything compared to all of you. I normally work market hours, so anything before 9:30 is a little bit outside my zone of competence here. But after that introduction, I'll just try and jump right into it. What I'd like to do this morning is talk a little bit more about my story and my case and how I came to be here, and then just discuss some of the challenges I've faced over the years and continue to face, and some of the things that I feel have been helpful in working through those things. And of course, with that, my hope is that you can take some of those things with you and hopefully help patients and help other people the way that they've helped me over the years. So my story really starts, excuse me, I'm a little behind the times here. Nope. Like I said, off, market hours here.
Might be helpful.
Well, that's, oh, now we're talking. So there's my entire presentation. Thank you, everybody. It's been great being with you. Sorry, I spent last week in Ireland, and existentially, I'm not sure any of you were actually in the room. So my story really starts in March of 2009. I was a high school senior, pretty average kid, going off to college. All the applications are in. You're kind of mailing in school for the rest of the year. And I was playing a rec league basketball game on a Saturday night. And after the game was over, I felt some muscle soreness in my right calf. Felt like absolutely normal muscle soreness. Didn't think anything about it. Went to bed. Got up the next morning. It was a little worse. Thought, okay, maybe I did something to it. Maybe I pulled it. Maybe, who knows? Throughout the course of Sunday, it keeps getting worse. It was very gradual. I said, all right, if it's this bad or worse in the morning, I'm going to get up and go to the doctor. Get up Monday morning, and it was much worse. I remember crawling downstairs from my bedroom, laying on the kitchen floor. I pulled the phone off the counter, called my mom, and said, all right, Mom, we got to go to the doctor. By the time I got to my primary care physician, he opened the exam room door, saw my leg, which was now red and starting to swell up to about twice the normal size, shuts the door, grabs a measuring tape, takes a reference point, and then immediately just sends me to the ER. I got to the ER there in Columbus, Ohio, about noon maybe. And my last memory is probably 3 in the afternoon. It's a hard diagnosis, still trying to figure out what goes on. Was admitted to the ICU the following morning. And my last memory for about 6 weeks is being told, well, we're going to take you into surgery. We're going to try and figure out what's going on. And then it was lights out. This is all in the course of about, as the doctor said, about 3 days. So as I am coming through surgery here, I've had some, by the way, this was my starting point. This was the month before I went to the hospital. Normal guy, normal kid, looking to row in college. Nothing too terribly abnormal or extraordinary going on. The last time I was in the hospital was when I was born, so pretty clean bill of health. And then March 16th rolls around, and special thank you to the OSU Medical School for helping out with the labs here. I stole this right from my surgeon's notes, as a matter of fact. That first surgery was where they discovered that it was, in fact, necrotizing fasciitis. Debridement starts. I think there were actually a series of debridements there in the beginning until they actually had to amputate the right lower extremity. It was the first thing to go. But as I understand it, the real problem then was it had taken long enough to diagnose that the infection had actually spread into my right arm. Didn't know it was there. I was already unconscious, couldn't tell them about it. But at that point, they couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting any better. All the tissue was gone. My right lower extremity was gone. Didn't seem to be helping. Discovered it in my right arm. Rushed me back to surgery. Start debriding the right arm. And during that operation is when heart failure kicked in. Heart, lung, kidney, and liver all went there in pretty short succession. And a lot of that was due to just the overload of the infection itself. Although, as a side note here, which it doesn't come through in the notes, I really did, and one of the things I hope you all take away is that I got really unlucky one time. Contracted a really nasty sickness. But the series of events that leads me to being here and leads me to getting to lead my life it has really been amazing to watch, and I'm much more fortunate than I am unfortunate. One of the first things that happened was during that surgery, actually. The vascular surgeon who was operating on me at the time turned out to be my next-door neighbor. And he came out of the ER after being surprised to see me in there, OR, excuse me, and runs into my dad. My dad's like, "Mike, what are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I got some things I need to talk to you about," and walked me through the process. And he said, "Look, I just put Blake on our heart-lung bypass. We normally would never do that with a patient already in septic shock, but I know Blake, and by the way, I'm just using these terms. I think you all know what they mean. I have no idea. But I know Blake's young and Blake's strong, and we're going to give Blake a chance." So thank goodness for that. But he said, the machine we've got Blake on is really only a surgical bypass. It's not really a support mechanism. But if we move him down to Ohio State, they've got an actual bypass machine where we can really keep him alive for a couple more days. I believe the thing that was said by my neighbor to my dad at that point was, well, if we move him to Ohio State, he can stay alive long enough for his brother to get home. My older brother was a freshman in college at the time. And he said, that'll buy him a few hours. Anderson can get home and say goodbye, and then we'll go from there. My parents said, well, what choice do we have? We'll do it. Got to Ohio State, and this is where things were really probably at their most grim. Very little hope was given. I know, I'm sure a dreaded question that's impossible to answer. What are the chances of survival? Good luck in most cases, of course, guessing that, but no chances were given. Although, as I was put on this ECMO bypass machine, as I understand it at the time, was much more sort of experimental than it is now. I've since talked to my surgeons and found out that it's a more common procedure, especially even for infections, which is pretty cool. These I copied from the labs, which I had some help with, one of my physicians. As I mentioned, I don't have any idea what any of this means. So, I'll take your help. Although, in the spirit of tooting my own horn, I've been told that creatinine phosphokinase number is still sort of some unofficial record at Ohio State. So, scoreboard. There's always a silver lining. My primary physician, but he was the trauma surgeon at Ohio State. These were notes I took right off of his own notes. Really, I think the punchline was this was a day-to-day, in and out type of thing. More often than not, I'm in surgery, having who only knows what done. None of this I can remember, by the way. This is all really in that 6-week window. In this list of surgery dates, I probably came to around, April 20th. I think that underlined 4/14. I remember the last two, which were sort of minor and really adjustments that weren't really traumatic. And that's about it. So coming to, I really was in the condition as you see now. Horrible physical shape. Everything was kind of destroyed, but those really severe portions of the treatment were pretty much past. This was taken by our local newspaper in in the rehab hospital at Ohio State. This was 6 weeks of rehab and eating later. Again, obviously a low point. I think I'm about 90 pounds in that picture, and I'm 160 now. So all the muscle was gone. In March of 2009, I could bench press 240 pounds. In June, I could bench press 2 and struggled. All the muscle, of course, is gone, and that was really the trajectory of the recovery from there. As Dr. said, I got to enroll in Ohio State, which I didn't think I would go to originally, but when you grow up in my hometown, we're the next town over from Ohio State, they kind of send you the application in the mail, and went, loved it, loved every minute of it. I got to be careful where I say that, the Ohio State. If I say that in Michigan, I got to dodge rotten fruit, but it was a great experience. Decided to stay for law school, knew pretty quickly I didn't want to practice law, want to go back into investment and finance, but phenomenal experience. But when I started law school, I kind of said, all right, I need to get back in being active. I'm not, I've done college, I've done, I feel better, I'm fully recovered. I need something to do for the rest of my life to be active. And right from the get-go, when I'd gotten sick, people had said, well, there's this adaptive rowing, and there's para-rowing, and there's the Paralympics, and you could do all that, and you'd be in great shape for it. I said, no thanks. That's really not where I want to spend my time. If any of you have had exposure to rowing, you know that it's really a leg-driven sport. That's where a lot of the speed comes from. And especially in the leg-driven side of the sport, it's in multiple-person boats, 4s, 8s, pairs, things like that. And there's just a huge speed difference between what I do now and what I knew I would do now and what I did before. And I said, well, okay, it's really almost an entirely different sport. And I've had that. I loved it. I can remember that fondly, but I'm going to move on to something else. Of course, I graduated and said, okay, I need to still work out and be active. Well, one of the best ways to work out, especially from a wheelchair, is on a rowing machine. Inside, can strap it down, and for any of you that have been on a rowing machine, it's such an efficient workout anyway, this is a great way to get back after it. So I conceded that ground and said, okay, I'll get back on a rowing machine. Got back on a rowing machine, and one of the really neat things about rowing is the national team publishes time standards for the rowing machine, saying, all right, if you're this fast or faster, you can try out for the team, and we'll take a look at you. If you're this fast or faster, you can probably make the team. If you hit a certain number, they'll just call you. And I got under that number, and they reached out and contacted me. And if that had not happened, I would have never gotten back in a boat. I say that with no sense of pride or determination. That was a mistake not doing it sooner. But the opportunity to row for the United States was, I didn't care what event it was. I didn't care what I had to do. I didn't care how much I missed what I'd done before. I'm going to take that. So that was really the care that I needed. Best decision I've ever made. The experiences I've gotten to have since have just been far beyond anything I could have imagined. This picture was taken, this is my first race in Amsterdam. Came in fourth at the World Championships 2014, and then we were off to the races. Again, I could be up here all morning telling stories about this, but suffice it to say, such a fulfilling experience. Being part of a team again, being a mix of the able-bodied and para teams is really something pretty special. Got to go some neat places and meet some neat people that if you'd asked me in 2009, I would have laughed you off, thinking it almost cruel, but here we are. And then, of course, really the biggest honor I've gotten was the election by the actual Olympic team as Athlete of the Year. I count a lot of them as my friends, and I've gotten to learn a lot from them, and it really is one team, one dream. It's really special to see from the inside. So that brings us to really the important part, I think, or I hope, of the talk, and that is I'd like to frame this as some of the things I wrestled with in terms of things that I felt like I lost after I got sick, and some of the ways I felt like I coped with that and recovered those. And we'll start with this loss of identity. It's strange because if you'd asked me in high school before all this happened, well, are you afraid of losing your identity? I really don't think I could have registered what that even meant, right? Like, what do you mean lose my identity? I just am who I am, right? Like it's not really a thing you can lose. Well, it's funny the things you don't know you have until they're gone, right? So I thought, okay, let's just put down a list of things that I would use to describe myself. So here's our trip through the mind of an 18-year-old male. Forgive me for that. And it is funny how seemingly superficial some of these things are. Oh, that's the wrong direction. It is. A lot of it is physical. Independent. Never would have listed that one, but that was really painful. to go from being 18 and on the verge of college and life, and wow, everything's out in front of me, to wow, I can't eat, and I can't sit up, and I can't speak, and my cognition's fine. Well, it depends who you talk to, but everything else is gone. And wow, I'm basically an infant again here at 18, and I'm watching my friends go to prom, and my friends graduate, and my friends compete, and here I am in the ICU. And suddenly I've had to deal with all these things. I think I was always accused of that. Seldom accused of that. I swear in the afternoon that gets a laugh. That's the comic relief slide. The outlook for this is really grim. But before we move on, I've never brought this up in front of a crowd before, but only in the last couple of years it's really occurred to me how powerful the thing this is. The question that really was plaguing me, I think, was where does my value come from? Right? What does it mean to have? Where's my self-worth derived from? What does that mean to me now? And the context in which I was asking that question, of course, was, all right, I'm deprived of all these utilitarian functions that I can do, right? My physical identity, my athletic identity, you name it, it feels like it's gone. And I was wrestling with that. Okay, so where do I get meaning and self-worth out of that? That's a hard question. Up until recently, that was sort of the only context in which I would have asked it. But more recently, and I know I'm late to the party on this, there's plenty of literature out there on this, but it's amazing. It's been amazing to see, especially through the Olympic process, how actually this question, I think, plagues high achievers almost the most. There are a number of people I've gotten to meet and interact with that I think in some ways struggle with it more than I did. And they get to a place of, okay, setting goal, achieving goal, moving on, doing better. And finally they reach what may be the pinnacle of their career or their goals or a gold medal or whatever it is. And they reach that plateau, and then they still don't find whatever it was they were looking for. And now they're really in trouble, because now they look around and say, well, I've tried everything else. What's left for me to do? I thought all these things would give me this sense of identity I was looking for, and I've done them all and coming up empty. Particularly the number of Olympic athletes that you could talk to that this is true of is really amazing. And it's not just, you hear about the post-Olympic depression phenomenon, where a lot of that's just the activity slows down, and so you kind of need something to do with yourself, especially if you retire. But it goes deeper than that. It really is that notion of, all right, well, as good as I am, what happens? And then I think the sad thing about that doesn't get talked about enough is a lot of high achievers are very, very lonely. Achievement in our society is seldom an accident, period, whatever field you're in. And a lot of the commitment required to meet that level of achievement is isolating, right? All right, bury your nose in a book, go back to work, steady, and that's an iterative process that seems to go on forever. Well, the process of that, which is par for the course, it's very, very isolating. It's very, very lonely. Well, the other problem there is, if I get lonely and I'm rowing and I'm, in this situation, I can lean on a coach, I can lean on a teammate, and they're going to be there to support me. Well, we don't generally think of the high achievers in society as people we need to support. Like, oh, well, yeah, but look at them. Look at everything they've done. They're good. They've got it figured out. Let's not, let's just move on. That's fine. I think that's an assumption that a lot of us bring to the table. I certainly do. I'm guilty of that. I'm only speaking in the first person here. And so I offer that as saying, I think this question is much more universal than it first occurred to me when I was first wrestling with it. And in the spirit of answering that question, I'm gonna do it woefully little justice, especially at 8:50 in the morning. But one of the things that really helped me turn the corner on really, I think, my entire view was reading a number of authors, but George MacDonald in particular has been hugely impactful to me. George MacDonald's frequently listed as one of the most influential authors on C.S. Lewis, who's probably had more impact on my own thinking than any other author. But this really stuck with me, especially as an amputee. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. You have a body. And again, as I say, I'm going to do this woefully little justice. But I acknowledge that this is a huge question that people have been wrestling with for millennia, whether or not it's true. I am not going to try and examine that this morning, other than to say, if you'll allow me a cheap out, I do think this is the best explanation of the evidence. I don't believe this because I think it's a useful construct. I don't believe this because I think it helps me sleep at night. That is true. It does. Both of those things are true. But I really think it's the best explanation of the evidence. Especially in our professional lives at work as an investment analyst, we talk a lot about intrinsic value, which to us means what's a business really worth. That's where we spend our time. Well, people have intrinsic value. It's not just what you can do. It's not derived from your ability. It's not derived from anything we bring to the table. We are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable things, and value is one of them. And I needed reminded of this. That was really an essential starting point for me. Having said that, the second thing I really struggled with was loss of certainty. Just planning for the future, right? I mean, it's something we all do. You try and look out, especially at that age. Okay, well, what am I going to do? All my plans are off the table. I've got to rewrite the book here. What happens? Something I came across, actually, as I mentioned, C.S. Lewis was incredibly effective in my own life. He wrote a book after his wife passed away called A Grief Observed. And he said some pretty profound things, but one of the things that I thought was broadly applicable was this, that no one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. And I really found in the process of mourning my legs, really a lot of that grief was I'm just afraid of what I'm going to do next. I don't have a good answer for, can I go to college? Can I make it through? Can I have a career? Can I have a family? All those questions. No one's immune from those questions, but they become acute when the tools you think you were going to have to get through them are now gone. That was hard. And I'll drop a caveat in here. Everything I'm saying this morning, all this advice I'm trying to give, if you'll allow the term, I'm not that good at. There's a little, please believe me, that's not just false humility. I struggle with these things every day. I have to work at it. And some things I'm better at than others. But when I'm really being focused and I'm really diligent and I'm really trying to get out of that downward spiral you can get in, all the what ifs, the dreaded what ifs. When I try and apply this kind of thinking, that's what really helps me. So I go to a simple heuristic for my dealing with anxiety, uncertainty, the future, you name it. One, is it knowable? Right? In many extents, the future just is not knowable. It's scary, but it's not knowable. One of the things that the example I use is, okay, well, I'm going to go to the trials this summer in New Jersey and try and make the U.S. national team. That is a knowable event. I'm also going to die, eventually. That is a knowable event in a sense, but not in the abstract, right? Or not in the specific, I should say. So which one am I going to worry about? Well, I'm going to worry about the one I know is coming. I'm going to worry about the trials. Is it controllable? Can I influence the outcome of the event when it gets here? Well, as far as my death goes, you can make an argument one way or the other, but as far as trials go, that's basically all in my hands. Okay, great. This is probably something that's worth worrying about at this point. What can I do about it right now? A number of these things, if you can answer yes to 1 and 2, but you can't do anything about it right now, it really deserves to be put on a sticky note and put to the side. Easier said than done. But in the event that you can do something about it right now and it rises to that level, it's pretty effective. What can I do about trials right now? Well, I can go work out. I can go lift the weights. I can go crank the chain and get going. Okay, that's something that I'm going to allow to come through my screens and get to me on a day-to-day basis. And if I can't answer yes to these 3 questions, I'm going to let it go. Or I'm going to try. As I say, that's the part where the rubber meets the road. I wrestle with that every single day. But to the extent that it might be helpful, I think this is about as simple as I can bake it down for myself, and I hope that's effective. The last thing, which was, I think the younger you are, the more acute it is, just as a function of time, was really that loss of opportunity. As we said, this really dovetails with loss number 2, right? Loss of certainty. Well, my universe of possible outcomes just shrank. And that really, really hurts. And sure, if you'd asked me at 18, I knew a lot of those things were never going to happen, right? I mean, that's part of life. You're not going to do everything. But at some point, you thought you could. And that's pretty cool. All right, well, my path through life just got a whole lot narrower. So how do I deal with that? How do I deal with the loss of something I never had? That was a strange place to be. And I bring this up, hopefully not as a vexatious example, but I thought I think the best tool here really is a magnetic compass. Right? Magnetic compass is a great tool for finding out where you want to go. But it's only valuable in context, right? Like I have to know a few things before this tool becomes useful, right? I got to know what hemisphere I'm in, or else I'm going to go the exact opposite direction. I've got to know where I want to go in general before I can get there in specific. Well, which direction do I need to go? Where are my landmarks? So what's going on around me has a much bigger impact on where I'm going to be destined in the future than I had really allowed initially. And a simpler way to say that is perspective is reality, right? I mean, that's how we do it. In our business, we call it benchmarks. I know you all have them, and we have them in every profession, in every context. All right, what am I going to pick as my benchmarks? And right there, early on at 18, well, I think it's natural that all right, my benchmarks are my peers. Well, that's a pretty painful comparison at this point, right? I'm watching my friends who, God love them, they wanted me to be there, and they would do everything they can to involve me and bring me along and help me, but I can't do it. That's a really tough gap to measure yourself against. But this is I want to introduce you to my point of comparison. This is my cousin Matt Helms. Matt's 5 months older than I am. We grew up together. For those of you who are lucky enough to have cousins or siblings close to you, you know what that relationship's like. Drive each other nuts, but never. It's hard to beat that. Well, as the picture indicates, Matt was actually a really good soccer player as a kid. He made the Olympic development program team and was in Europe playing in April of 2004. And on the way home from the tournament, on the way to De Gaulle, the bus hit rain and turned over, and Matt died at the scene. And to date, that was harder than losing my legs, right? Legs I've still got a future on. Legs I can get back in some extent. Matt, I can't get back. Wow, what does that mean? Well, one of the things that reminds me of, and when I was in that downward spiral of this uncertainty in my opportunity, like, wow, I made it to 18. Matt got 13. Matt got a good 13. And I can celebrate that. But I got a great 18. I mean, I got an 18 I never deserved, that's for certain. And now I've had all this time since 18 where I get to get up in the morning and take a crack at it. Like, I get to get out of bed and try and make something happen. And that's pretty special. And again, I say I wrestle with this. I am not that great at it. But the simple phrase I distill it down to is, life's a get to, not a have to. I get to be here. I got to get on a plane in Columbus, Ohio yesterday and come to Wilmington, Delaware. And all right, you laugh at that. And talk with the caliber professionals in this room. I mean, I don't know any other 27-year-old who gets to do that. Really. I mean, that is exciting. I mean, that is really a privilege. I get to do that. I get to go home tonight and get back on my rowing machine and train and row for the United States national team. I mean, what a day I get to have today. That's really special. And I don't want to bog you down with loss or mourning. There's a time for that. But really, one time I can't remember where I was told this, but very early on I was said, don't regret growing old. It's a privilege not denied to many. And that really got me. I said, wow, regardless of the condition I'm in, I can still do something. I can still have an impact. I can still go forward and make a difference. And that's hugely important. And a lot of people don't get that opportunity. And that's it for my presentation. But if you give me just a couple more minutes, anytime I get to be in front of a crowd like this, which is very rare, I really feel like I need to say this. As a patient, some of the people that made the most impact on me, and that or medically or emotionally, or you name it, I never got to meet, and I never got to thank, and I never got to give back to. People that went above and beyond, that of their own volition chose to remain nameless. Long nights, early mornings, the extra cup of coffee they brought my parents, the The first 3 nights I was at Ohio State, my cardiologist, my parents came in the morning and there was a bed in my hospital room, and the cardiologist just said, "Wake me up if anything goes wrong," and slept next to me. I mean, I can't find those people and say thank you. And as a matter of course, I know your patients are in the same condition. And I've kind of thought, well, Dr. Steinberg, who I referenced earlier, who, carried my water for months, emotionally, physically, did everything he could to give me a fighting chance. Well, what if I hadn't made it? Odds were good. If I hadn't made it and I could still come back and say that, I'd say, man, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for taking a swing. Thank you for trying. And I think one of the tragedies of your profession is that despite all that effort you put in, it looks like a bad outcome. You don't get the feedback that you did the right thing. You just don't. And that is horrible on a day-to-day basis. But if I, in some small way, if I can sit here and say, please keep up that work, I know it's a slog. I can't carry that load. I knew I didn't want to be a physician. I couldn't do that. But on behalf of the patients that don't get to be around, and thank you for the extra effort, I am grateful for that. So much contribution from people like yourselves is why I get to be here and do these kind of things. And I can't thank them. I can't say what that means. I can't give evidence of what that did. But it really makes all the difference in the world. So you all are a great audience. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for having me.
We do have time for a few questions, and also from 8 o'clock to 8:30 or so, Blake's going to hang around if anybody wants to just talk to him one-on-one or ask him some other types of questions. It's a really powerful story, and we've all gone through hardships one time or another, and it's difficult not to get depressed when you go through difficult times. So talk a little bit more about how you turn that around. When you're at the bottom and you're depressed and you go, my life is gone, I can't do what I used to do, I may never be able to do it again. How do you, in your brain, turn that around and say, I got to change this?
It's a great question. I think, so to your first point, something I've landed on that I just think is so evidently true is I tell people, everybody you meet, everybody in a room's got stuff they're dealing with. There are people in this room that are dealing with way harder things than I am. That's for certain. The difference is you can see my problems when I come in a room. It's really the primary difference. It doesn't make them better or worse. It just makes them a little different. In terms of how to recover that when you're really I think at the low point, like I said, for me, it's kind of that downward spiral. I very seldom am sitting still, I've noticed, mentally, in terms of mood. I feel like I'm either getting better or getting worse. So what's the inflection point? I've found the first step is to fixate on something I can do is one thing. That's a small thing. And that can be tiny. That can be, I'm going to make my bed. I'm going to do that. I'm going to accomplish that task. I'm going to get up and I'm going to work out. I'm going to take some strokes, and that's going to get me an hour from now, and that's going to help. And the second thing I do in that process is find something that you're thankful for from somebody and tell them. That is just, I think that is just, if I've had a secret, if something has helped me, that's it, right? I mean, excuse the cornball reference here, but when I'm worried and I can't sleep, I count my blessings instead of sheep. That works. That happens. And being thankful, especially to someone, and I say to someone in particular for a reason, gratitude acts in two ways. One, when someone does something for you that you should be grateful for, you just should tell them. That's the right thing to do. But the second thing is when you thank someone for something, you're subconsciously admitting to yourself and you are confessing that there's something good in your life. You are confessing that, wow, I've got this thing that I am grateful for. That's a good thing. There were days, and I very distinctly, the first time I did this was almost by accident, and I'm so grateful for it. I was in the ICU, and really in that phase of no physical recovery, but my mind was back. So mine's going a million miles an hour. I've got, all these things are kind of flooding in, but I can't do anything about it yet. Really a low point, not so much medically, but in my recovery. And I was really hurting. Like everything you could see around the room was just a reminder of something going wrong. And then my mom walked in. And just my mom just walked in and sat down, and she was sitting next to me reading a book to me or something like that. And it really hit me hard, like, oh, hey, my mom's here. You know what, my mom's here. Oh, hey, how about that? Mom's here. And it was like, wow, I got a mom that's here. And she's great. She's looking out for me. All right, well, that's a good thing. And then I got an older brother that's going to come in later, and my older brother, once he got home from college, would come to the hospital and spend the night. All right, well, for a 19-year-old, that's a pretty heavy lift to watch your brother go through that. I think my family had a much worse go of it than I did, especially there in the beginning. I got a lot of the really hard things I wasn't around for. I didn't wrestle with. They had to, especially my older brother, who's, there was just the three of us. It was me, my older brother, and our cousin Matt. Growing up, that was it. And if my brother were here, well, he might not tell you, but he'd said, there was a point where I thought, I'm going to be the only one left. It's going to be it for me. Like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? My boys are gone. What a horrible thing to have to go through. But here he is, and he's coming in the hospital, and anything I needed, he would have moved the building if he needed to. Wow, that's a good thing. A lot of people don't get that. That's pretty cool. And you can see where I'm going with that. So it's a downward spiral, but it's an upward spiral too. And it's really sort of a compounding effect I've found. So anyway, and that's easier said than done. But that's kind of how I think about that.
All right. From the audience?
Thank you. Great talk.
You have to hold the microphone fairly close to.
Sorry. When they put the announcement out that you were coming, one of the first things I thought about were, did you have concerns about the water in Brazil? I mean, we'd heard so much about it, and for a patient, especially with your history, I would think anyone would have some questions about the water in Brazil.
Yeah, great question. It comes up a lot. I guess the short answer is yes. The action, and I don't know if you saw it, but this didn't so much help. The rowing lake is essentially a runoff pool from a number of different neighborhoods. So wasn't great. We didn't go swimming, but I'll give the. So to answer part of your question, I'm not more worried about illness or germs now than I was before. You get cut, put Neosporin on it, put a Band-Aid on it. Be smart. Little concern just because you don't want to get sick during a competition. But the Olympic Committee really took pretty good care of us on that front. We had doctors on site, State Department there. We disinfected everything. A lot of one of our room keys in the village was dropped in like 1.5 feet of water and it's still there. Coach was like, we've got to. We'll be okay. It'll, as far as littering in the lake, one of our guys was training down there and hit a couch. So, like in the middle of the lake. So we weren't that concerned about the key. But yeah, to answer your question, I did get sick, unfortunately, after the racing was over. The last 3 days there I spent in bed, just GI stuff. I think I got bad ice cubes, but yeah.
Other questions? Just wait for the microphone.
And I should say, please don't. Hopefully you can tell. Don't hold back. Anything's fair game.
Yeah, we know the surgeons at both places, Riverside and Ohio State. Steve Steinberg is an extraordinary man, as you know. I know Steve pretty well. I think it's personally. I think the fact that they put you on cardiopulmonary bypass at Riverside is extraordinary. That surprised me that they did that, and I think it's obviously had a benefit. Well, we were able to save a lot more intensive care patients than we used to, and we've identified a syndrome called PICS, post-intensive care syndrome. Can you kind of relate to us what that was like the first few weeks to months when you were in rehab and at home?
Sure. I've had some discussions about PICS before. I don't know that I suffered from it acutely, but it's hard to say because just in terms of, all right, I don't think it was so much my ICU experience or intensive care experience that I was struggling with. It was just my legs are gone and how do I get through that? So parsing that apart is tough. I think it was probably more for my family, actually, that really struggled with it. One of the things that made the ICU a lot easier for me, I think, was, there was I could see on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis that I was getting better, right? I mean, I'm healing. Okay, well, I'm not going to get too down about how I am today because look where I was last week. So that, there was always a next gate to get through for me, right up until I left rehab. And then really getting home for me was the hard part, I felt, because, that your recovery plateaus, right? I mean, everyone's does, but, okay, this is, I'm finally realizing I have to stop saying, oh, well, maybe it'll be better next week. Well, no, this is probably just the steady state now. When I got home and I bought a pair of running shoes a week before I went to the hospital. And they were in the place I dropped them when I went to the hospital 3 months ago. And I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't thinking about it. Jeez, gotta be kidding me. And that was a struggle. And I wish I had a better quick answer other than you deal with it and you know it's there. And then I wrestled with it. And, every time by the door was like, wow, doggone it. But then, a couple weeks in, and, you see the shoes, you almost know the reaction's coming before you get the stimulus. I don't know if that makes sense, but you're like, all right, great, here we go again. It doesn't land as hard. It doesn't land as hard. Like, I remember a couple times being like, oh, that's kind of funny. I thought that was going to really bother me. And all right, well, okay, we'll get a little better. And, I think just time heals that wound. But the other thing I'd be remiss in saying is I have the best friends in the world. My high school buddies didn't treat me, my buddies from childhood. I actually grew up in Connecticut, but they would come and visit from the East Coast, and they didn't miss a beat. They don't treat me any differently than they did before. One of the oldest books we know of being written, and I don't mean to say this certainly in a religious context or the context of whatever we believe, but Job is generally the story of suffering, right? It's how humans wrestle with it. It was one of the first accounts of wrestling with suffering. One of the things that jumped out to me in the book of Job is, everything goes wrong for Job, and then his 3 friends show up, and they sit silently for 3 days. It's the most effective time they spent with Job, was just sitting there and being present in his suffering. And I think that really speaks to something about, it did to me. My friends didn't have the right thing to say, didn't show up with some rah-rah speech. They just showed up and sat there. And that was all they could do. And that's all I needed. And little by little, that made the difference. So anyway, I would say that was what did it.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And I think it's important that you recognize that your family is going through this every bit, if not more than you are.
Oh, yeah.
And we're finally getting around to kind of recognizing that when we care for our patients.
Yeah, that was meaningful. To your point, one of the things that I needed to hear, I think, and really valued was when, like, my older brother, we were talking, I was sort of telling him the things that I was missing and things I was missing out on. He goes, well, man, look, it pales in comparison to what you're going through and everything, but, the thing that you lost, I lost that part in you too, right? And I had a buddy, he and I played racquetball every Sundays. He's like, look, I know it's not the same, but I lost that piece in you too. And so that really, confessing that and sort of addressing that really made it easier. It's like, okay, we're actually going through this together. It's kind of interesting. We lost the same thing in that sense. So anyway, I think I completely agree. Thank you for the question.
Dr. Fuller.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I think you learned at a very young age that the internal motivation is a big factor in how to recover from this sort of a thing. Not everyone is internally motivated. A lot of people depend on external motivation. So I'm wondering, as we deal with patients, how we might teach, instruct, or motivate them to utilize their internal strength to help with their recovery. Do you have any insights as to how you could go about that?
I wish I did. I wish I had better ones, honestly, because I thought the same thing. I was surrounded by such great people that a lot of it was made easier for me. One thing I guess I would say is I think, again, from a patient's perspective, I think you're absolutely right. No matter what someone said, and everyone that knows me would say stubbornness is one of my defining personality traits, good or bad. My dad's fond of saying your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. Mine's probably stubbornness. But to that extent, if I didn't want to get better, I wasn't going to get better. To your point about internal motivation, I know speaking with a number of other physicians of my own, that you do everything you can, you pour yourself into a patient, and it's like, well, where's the return? Like, why aren't what's the deal? That's got to be a hard thing to let happen and watch. I've never had to go through it, but I do think you got to let yourself off the hook if that's the case. I mean, at some point, you got to just accept that that's the reaction we're dealing with. I think, for me, the first thing was tell me the truth, right? Just everyone knows what time of day it is, right? Like, don't tell me I can do something I can't do. Don't paint a rosier picture than is reasonable. And then secondly, is stick with reasonable. One of the things that really came out of law school and changing how I view the world is we don't care about possible. Possible is really not relevant on a day-to-day basis, right? Anything's possible when you really get down to brass tacks. You care about what's reasonable, right? Okay, well, what's reasonable here, Blake? Well, get better and go to college. That's reasonable. I have physicians that walked in and say, look, you're already enrolled here. We can help you get through that. That's a good goal. It's certainly doable. We know the process there. Let's do that. Oh, okay, yeah, I buy that. All right, you've sold me on that. I can do that. And then it's little markers like that was what helped me. Again, I wish I had a better turnkey solution for you on that, but just there is some element of predetermination on that, or self-determination on that, I think.
Tell us what your training schedule is going to be this week.
Yeah, I try and do 2 days, 6 days a week, and it's nice because I generally travel 1 or 2 days a week for work. So last night, this morning is my off weeks or off day, 24-hour break, and then back at it. I'm gonna go a cappella here for a second. I don't want to. One thing that I try and work in that again, it's hard this early in the morning for me and everyone else, but it's an awful somber story. But I think people that know me well know that my life is not a downbeat one. Never really has been. I get a lot of joy out of life, and I get a lot of happiness out of life, and my friends have done that with me. One story that it's hard to work into the slides, but I like to tell to kind of give you an idea where we were all at. That spring, I got sick. It was spring break the next week, and I had 2 friends on the rowing team with me. One of them was my roommate now, actually. We're going out to Florida. It's like senior spring break. This is going to be great. And then just boom, gone. And of course for the 2 of them too, they're like, all right, well, this was a part of you that we lost. Well, we all ended up going to Ohio State together. And 2 years later, our sophomore year, we went on spring break down to Daytona Beach. And this was when, all that, I don't know if you remember this, when all that Charlie Sheen nonsense was going on. That'll be relevant here in a minute. So my buddies and I leave, and my mom had T-shirts made that said 2.5 men on the front, and were numbered on the back, 1, 2, and a half. And you get reactions out of people, when you go out in public like that. That was sort of an interesting experiment there. But well, yeah, thank you. We thought it was hilarious. But part of it was it's also this great icebreaker, right? Like, all right, look, as soon as I come in a room, everybody wants to know what happens. And that's not, people aren't being rude, people aren't being whatever. That's a natural human emotion. We're attracted to something that's such a distinctive characteristic. Hey, what's the story? But most people don't want to ask. It's like, well, I'd almost rather have you ask because then we can talk about it, and then you're going to go from seeing me as a guy in a chair to just seeing Blake that, happens to be missing both legs. And that's a cool process for me to get to do because we get to know each other really, really quickly. I get to meet people all the time, and the first thing, much like yourselves, well, everyone in this room now knows, the worst things that have happened to me are now all on the table, and how I feel about them. You all know me pretty well. Well, that's pretty cool because that's a reciprocal process, and now I get to meet a lot of cool people that know me pretty well. I was awful close with Dr. Steinberg before we'd ever met, he knew everything about me. Well, it's kind of a neat process to go through life that way. So, and my friends go through me with that, and it's been fun. That's an asset, not necessarily a liability. I don't mean to paint it just purely as a negative. That's not the right view on things. But anyway.
All right. Thank you all very much. As I said, Blake will hang around for some questions and answers one-on-one if you like. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Not every year on the workout cycle.